charge now. I mean, it's absurd. It's like
Did not know
the
that.
overreach, huh?
I said I did not know that. So if you
Yeah.
basically you can't even screen for eviction since, like you were saying, February of last year here in Virginia.
I mean, again, I don't know the details of it. I can just tell you for a fact there's a time period that if you in any way, shape, or form cite that you're not going to rent to somebody or call attention to it in any way, shape, or form, that they got evicted from X date to Y date. Like it's a criminal charge. I kid you not. Like you're going to go to jail for this. I'm like, this is stupid. You know, it's not
Yeah.
even like, hey, you could be sued or anything like that. Or you can get a housing complaint against you, like handcuffs. Like this is absurd. Like someone's gonna go to the magistrate's office, swear out a warrant, and a cop's gonna arrest you for that. It's absurd. And it's not like a class 3 misdemeanor. I think it's actual jail time. Like this is dumb. I mean, you could just fall into that mistake, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And well, in this, I mean, at least is that period before that still covered too, or is that something where they're still leaning on that, and it's just that specific time period where you can't?
Memory serves as that time period. I kind of brain dumped it because I just told myself I will never call anybody out on anything because I don't feel like taking the chance. You know, I don't feel like having them. You know, I want to keep it at a 10-foot pole distance as opposed to right up on my grill. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, that's the kind of thing you get with VAMA. Like, that's just one of 1,000 examples I could give you. What we do on this call is awesome because this is about the investment, how to get into it. But once you're a landlord, like you got to be part of the team and support the calls because we're getting our butts kicked, and this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Ready to start, Chase?
Yeah. Is everything set and going, Mateus?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we had a little bit of technical issue, so it's a different YouTube link. I can send that to people if they need it, but otherwise we are good to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm just going to turn it right over to you, Evan, and if you'd like to make an introduction, a little bit about your background, and get us right into what you're going to talk about today.
Sure thing. So my name's Evan Mayo. I'm an attorney at Tremblay & Smith in Charlottesville. I've done a little bit of rental investing in Harrisonburg, but mostly here in Charlottesville. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. Grew up there, went to Vanderbilt, and then came to UVA for law school. And just like the Charlottesville area so well that I changed my mind about moving back to Tennessee and ended up sticking around here. I will tell you a little bit more about my story as an investor as we kind of get into the deck. I think what might work well is if you have a question, instead of my trying to answer them as we go, just drop it in the chat and I'll make sure to hit all those at the end so that if you got a question about something that I've asked, you won't have to try and remember it the whole time. Just typical disclaimers here. Legal advice is very different from what we're about to do, which is an educational seminar. Legal advice means you pay me by the hour. I look at your specific problem and give you a specific answer. This is not legal advice. And one of the things I'm going to cover today is fundraising. Fundraising is a complex subject. It's governed by rules that are enforced by the SEC. You shouldn't jump in and just make your best shot at it. If you really want to do fundraising in a responsible way and use leverage to grow your portfolio, I'd recommend that you do work with an attorney to do that because it's easy to kind of misstep on those rules and it's hard to unwind a transaction that you did improperly. But it's pretty easy to, on the front end, set some guidelines and follow those and end up with a good result. Last thing, I hope nobody had this idea, but none of you are my clients. Nothing you share with me is privilege, so don't tell on yourself about something that's too significant. So thanks again, Chase, for asking me to speak. The idea that I pitched to him when we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago or months was how does a small landlord get to become a more significant landlord? It turns out that most people don't own property. Most people don't even want to own investment property. So of the approximately 110 million people who file 1040s every year, only about 9% of those, 10% of those will report Schedule E. Of course, there's some outlaws who have rental properties that don't report on Schedule E, but 1 in 10 is a good estimate. So of those, there's about 48 million rental units in the United States, and individual investors own about half of those. And then the other half are owned by institutional investors, things like BlackRock Capital, and the REITs and that sort of thing. Then when you drill down into individual investors, the average number of properties is 2, but most people only have 1 unit. And what that ought to tell you is that it's what's called a bimodal distribution, where there's a lot of people with 1 or 2 units, and then there are a few people with many, many units. And so the question and the challenge that I posed to Chase is, how do you get from 2 units, 1 or 2 units, like almost all individual investors are, to owning 10 plus or 20 plus, something like that? And the answer to that for me is through partnerships. I started off buying real estate in Charlottesville in 2014, bought my first home here. And then over the next 4 years, I think I acquired 2 more properties, and then a lease option. And then I was more or less out of money. I worked at that time a W-2 job. I'm self-employed now as an attorney, make decent money, but it just, in a market like Harrisonburg or Charlottesville, it only goes so far. So at that point, I was kind of I was hitting my head on the ceiling. I thought, this idea is not going to go, this technique is not going to move me any further forward. I'm going to be able to buy a property every couple of years, and that was not fast enough for me. So I started thinking and reading and figuring out about how I could move more quickly. And the answer for that was to try and look at what others had and what I had, and could we put them together? And, if I made a bigger pie, could I be satisfied with having a smaller piece of it? And the answer for me was yes. So when I was thinking about partnerships and what would work, I knew that I had a certain set of skills. I'm an attorney, so I can help on contract drafting or deal structuring. I had done a lot of hammering on my own first real estate property, so I had some understanding of sort of the nuts and bolts of a house. And I had some money. I was bankable, but really needed someone else to come in with a big chunk of money to make that work. So this is my recipe for figuring out how the partnership can work, or the process of forming a partnership. So figure out what you've got, figure out what's missing, and then identify somebody who's got those missing pieces. And then once you find that person, you can make the pitch. Find a deal, find an idea, find a platform, and say, here's what we can do together if we put together what you've got and what I've got, and we can each achieve more than if we were trying to kind of soldier on by ourselves. And believe me, that's an attractive prospect. When I started real estate investing, I was extremely scared of making a bad deal, or of someone taking advantage of me and selling me something at too high of a price and getting behind the 8 ball and being unable to catch back up. So I was, I would say not suspicious, but just skeptical, and particularly skeptical of people who seem to have a lot of interest in doing partnerships. I was thinking, well, perhaps they can't do it themselves. Perhaps they don't have what it takes to get a deal done by themselves. I've done a couple of deals by myself. Why would I need to work with anybody else? Turns out that perspective was dead wrong. So here's the normal components of a real estate deal in my mind. Somebody brings the money, somebody brings time, somebody brings the deal, and then either relationships or skills or time that are specific to these areas. So for money, that doesn't always mean money. When we talk about someone bringing the money, sometimes they're not bringing the actual check or the wire. They're just bringing access to money. They're a professional fundraiser, or they have really strong relationships with other people who will either loan to them and then they can loan into the entity. Or maybe they've got a really strong W-2 job but almost no debt. So the bank's going to let them take on a very high debt load to reposition, say, a multifamily asset with a very poor rental revenue. Something like that can be really useful. And I've done a deal like that before with someone who's a executive at a computer company that you probably all know. And his contribution basically is that he's got a really high number on his W-2, and he doesn't mind being a personal guarantor on some of the deals that we do. In that case, he also has brought money, but he didn't need to do that. It would have been enough for him simply to guarantee the loan to get it done. Somebody's got to spend time gathering up all the documents, talking to the general contractor, being the general contractor, and that all takes time. And finding I've gone along in my real estate career, I have less enthusiasm for that part than I used to, and I try and rely on other people and delegate on that. But particularly when you get into multi-unit projects, it just takes, everything seems to take 2 to 3 to 4 times as long, running down all the leases, updating the rent rolls, everything like that. Somebody's got to kind of be the responsible for that. Somebody's got to bring the deal. Usually that means the specific property, but sometimes it could mean if you've got a deal engine, something that regularly produces deals, you've got a wholesale company, or you have the time to go around and knock on doors, or you're a really skilled negotiator. Sometimes you can take a bad deal on the MLS and make it a good deal if you know what you're doing. And then there are some kind of auxiliary things that I think are not 100% necessary, but are really nice to have, particularly on certain types of projects: legal, accounting, general contracting, deal structuring, and property management. Accounting is one in particular. The farther I go in real estate investing, the more interested I get in tax treatment. And it's allowed me to take advantage of some opportunities with real estate that might not have been all that attractive, or wouldn't have seemed all that attractive to me when I was beginning, because I really wanted cash flow. And then as time goes on, and you start kind of watching your tax rate, and particularly, at the time that I was starting my career, I didn't have a great understanding of what taxable income meant in America, and what ordinary income was, and how it was taxed, and long-term versus short-term gains, and passive versus active income. And getting more information about that has let me create some tax losses on deals that might have otherwise been marginal, that became really, really valuable properties for me, not just in 1 year, but over a few years, and a few different techniques you can use for that. One of which you guys might be familiar with is cost segregation, which I would encourage you to look into, not just for multifamily properties, but anything duplexes or larger. I find that it usually pays for itself in 1 year. So the question that I think is worth asking when you're considering a partnership is, who's got what? For money, generally you want people who've got the high W-2s. Banks always love W-2 earners, meaning you're an employee and not a self-employed earner. When I became a partner at my firm, I started making more money, but I went from being a W-2 employee to a self-employed person. And it actually got harder for me to borrow from a bank, which was an unpleasant surprise that no one warned you of. Older people generally have more money than younger people because they've had more time to accumulate it. People with IRAs are always a good source of money. If you're not familiar with self-directed IRAs, that's a great phrase to just drop into Google and try and educate yourself. The general idea is that an individual retirement account is a wrapper, and you can invest in it normally in stocks or bonds, but you can invest in other things too if it's self-directed. And particularly with bond yields as low as they are right now, it's been a really effective strategy for me to seek out people who have IRAs and are not happy with their bond yields, but would like some fixed income in their portfolio. And that can happen through a note. And if they lend to you out of their IRAs, that's money that is not being used for anything else. It's not like they can spend that on a motorcycle or a jet ski or their children's education. So there's access to capital there that might otherwise be unused or poorly allocated to a low bond yield. People with real estate equity also are good. Those people are often opportunities, or they have access to significant money. If they don't have it right now, they can get it with a line of credit or a refinance, something like that. Who's got time? You've got time. Almost everybody here is invested enough in real estate to come and sit and just talk about it, which is, 1 in 10 people become landlords. Maybe 1 in 10 of those are enthused enough about it to come to something like this and try and hone their craft and get better at what we're doing. So almost everyone here would have some degree of time and is willing to contribute it towards becoming a better and more successful real estate investor. Younger people generally have more time than older people. They value their time at a lower rate, so they are more willing to do the kind of frustrating, unpleasant tasks associated with building a deal or moving a deal forward. And then people in real estate adjacent industries. My experience has been that people who are realtors or brokers, or agents or appraisers, um, or general contractors, I would consider a real estate adjacent industry. It's much easier for them to fit in something like going to look at a house as soon as it comes on the MLS, or networking with other people in the real estate community, because it's part of their job anyway. And so they tend to be the type of people that can exert extra time to move a project forward. On deals, who's got deals? Brokers and agents always have deals. People with real estate, with equity in their real estate, have deals, but sometimes they don't know it. If you've got a lot of equity in your real estate, you can generally sell it on terms that are really different. You don't necessarily need to command the highest price in order to pay off a mortgage that's at 90 or 85% of the total property price. So if folks have a lot of real estate equity, they often have a deal, and they're just not aware of it yet. They haven't been educated about the benefits, tax or otherwise, that might come with something like an installment sale or owner financing, or a lease with an option to purchase, something like that. And then the flip side of that is problem solvers, people who are willing to be creative and try a couple of different things and sit down with a spreadsheet or a notepad and a pen and work a deal out 4 different ways. What if I offered this? What if they finance some portion of it like this? What if I borrowed this amount from someone else? What if I converted that to equity after 3 years? Sometimes just that sort of brainstorming or loose ideation has created a good deal for me. So I wanted to show a little graphic, which I was primarily interested in doing just because I saw this tool online and thought it was really cool. So this is called a time graphic, and I built a little graphic here to show the development of my real estate, my little real estate projects. Bought my first home in July of 2014. Saved up my money and paid down extra on the mortgage, and then with the help of my dear wife. And then in mid-July of 2016, or sorry, August 2016, we bought our first investment property. And that was the one I hammered on and spent a ton of time on, and kind of got that, spent a lot of nights and weekends there for 6 months, and then got that to a much higher appraisal number, did a cash out refinance and got all my money back and a little bit more. And that kind of let me pursue the second primary home. And so this one became a rental. And so over the course of 2014 to 2018, halfway through 2018, I was reading about real estate all the time. I was 100% focused on accumulating more real estate, but this is all I could do. I got 3 houses in Charlottesville, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I was glad that I had those houses, but I was also kind of looking down the rest of my career as an attorney and thinking about becoming busier, maybe becoming a father in the next few years, and I realized it wasn't sustainable for me to go and hammer on houses on nights and weekends all the time, and that this would not let me achieve my goals as far as accumulating property. So I started reading more about creative financing and lease options and ways to control property or to buy property with less money down, so that I could get my unit count up, even if it meant less absolute money for me month to month. How could I get that unit count up higher and break out of being a small landlord and become a medium-sized landlord, which was my goal, maybe not everybody's. And so I did the lease option, and that kind of introduced me to the idea of partnership principles and how to structure partnerships. And I spoke with a guy I knew from high school who had built and sold an independent insurance agency. So he was really strong on Excel and accounting, very detail-oriented person. And we talked for a few months and put together an idea to buy in Chattanooga, where he already had some property and knew the market really well. And so when we saw a 6-unit commercial building, residential and commercial, come up for sale there, we went and raised money from somebody that I knew from playing video games online, actually. Dad always said I was wasting my time. He was dead wrong. That guy has become a trusted partner. So we bought the 6-unit, and then I bought another little thing in Charlottesville on kind of a simple equity deal. And then once we got the 6-unit kind of stabilized and was a proof of concept, went out and borrowed more money to buy 7 more units, 3 duplexes and 2 single family homes. So that was about 6 months after we bought the first thing. And then 5 months after that, we bought 12 more units. And then 3 months after that, 7 more. And then if you start to zoom in, you can kind of see the last one is I bought something here in Charlottesville on Friday. And that's my latest thing. And I broke my own rule. I'm going to have to go hammer on that one. But I thought it was kind of cool to see how those things kind of chunked up and became bigger acquisitions over time. And specifically with the stuff in Chattanooga, I know the market there pretty well because I grew up in Nashville, but I haven't had to put a ton of my money into that project at all. I've been able to finance probably 98% of the equity, or not just the equity, but the value of that portfolio. And that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to trade my time for real estate because I could not make money fast enough to buy at 20 or 15% down, even 15. Okay.
I love that graphic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think there's much more I could do with that little project, but I spent a little time on it last night, and that was a result of my efforts. Lawyer, not a graphic designer. I married a graphic designer.
Well, it definitely shows how you can speed things up. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So deal structuring and partnerships, there's a million different types of deal structures and partnerships that could be used and should be used in different circumstances in real estate. I want to just touch on 4 that I probably get the most questions about from real estate investors when I'm at a meeting and people find out I'm an attorney. And those are using notes, secured and unsecured notes, equity shares, shared appreciation notes, and syndications. And if you guys have questions about others or you've heard something and want to, I can't promise I'll have any information about something obscure, but if there's something else you have a question about, I'd be happy to touch on that too.
Would you be open to touching on? I know we didn't really talk about this before, but do you have any experience with subject twos?
Yes.
And would you be able to touch on that a little bit too? Because I think that's like like another creative financing term that people are throwing around a lot, and it confuses a lot of people. So
Sure thing. Yeah, if you would just type in subject to in the chat, I'll make sure to circle around on that. I can share what I know on that. I've done one and helped 2 others, help people close 2 others. So a little bit of experience, but I'll share what I know. So notes are the most popular and probably the most common way of loaning money. I use a lot of notes. And a note is just a promise to pay. And if it's a secured note, it means it's secured by collateral. If it's an unsecured note, it means it's not secured by any collateral. You've all signed notes. If you bought real estate, you've also signed notes if you bought a car, and potentially other things too. I think even, a layaway agreement, something like that may have been secured by, or may have been a note. The way that you collateralize the note, you can do a ton of different things with this. And this is a really interesting part of real estate to me, because the way that people want their notes secured is often not what you would expect. And it's not what I would have chosen if I were in their position. And I'll give you an example. What the most common form of collateralizing a note is what you do with a bank, right? They've got a deed of trust here in Virginia. We're a deed of trust state versus a mortgage. And they're in first position. And if you don't pay back the note, they have the right to foreclose on the property, to take title to the real estate from first position, and sell the real estate to get their money back. That's the goal of the collateral, is to have something that you can use to reclaim the money that you invested if the borrower defaults. And you can stack collateral in a property. That's why you can get a second line of credit or a HELOC in second position on your property for 6% if your mortgage is at 4%. The extra 2% is to compensate the lender for being in second position, because the higher up you go towards the value of the property, the greater the chance that when that thing is sold, you'll be the one who's left out in the cold without being made whole on the default note. So some other ideas about how to collateralize notes. One lady that I borrowed some money from on a note, she didn't mind if it wasn't secured. I told her I could put her in second position on some property in Charlottesville. This is a woman who lives in Harrisonburg. Or I could put her in first position on some property in Chattanooga. And she said, that's okay. I would just like you to personally guarantee the note. And she wanted my tax returns and my personal financial statement, which I provided. And then she said, but my number one, I trust you. I think you're going to pay this back. And I had a pre-existing relationship with this lady. But what I'm really worried about is if you died, if you were in a car wreck tomorrow, I hope your partners would make me whole, but I'm not sure of it. And so I kind of thought about that for a little while and came up with, well, what if I make you a partial beneficiary in my life insurance policy? And she loved that idea. And so that's what we did. And that was what she needed to be comfortable with loaning me the money. I mean, she's not really in any better position unless I die. But that was the one case, however unlikely it was, that made her uncomfortable. And so getting past that made that deal possible. You can pledge cash, stock, bonds, personal property like a car, a boat, heavy equipment. I would really like to have a Toro ditch witch or something like that, or like a skid steer. So if anyone wants to collateralize a note on that, where you don't think you'd like to pay it back, that might be an attractive option for me. If you have profits, so a hot topic in personal injury litigation, which I do, is collateralizing loans with anticipated payouts from your client's recoveries. So if I'm to expect a third of a big payout for a car wreck or something, I can borrow against that. Those companies are kind of in the gray area, sort of the seamy underside of litigation. But that's something that some firms use if they get in a cash crunch or if they want to make further investments. Secured notes are good. They're better for the lender, but then they encumber the property. So if you've got a piece of property that's encumbered at 60 or 70% of its loan to value, then it's going to be hard to put someone else in there and get a decent interest rate. If, as the borrower, an unsecured note is the gold standard. Getting an unsecured note is great. You can make money out of nothing. Well, out of something, but an unsecured something. And the reason that works, and the way that I kind of got the Chattanooga project going, is to find people who are willing to lend us money unsecured, based on personal financial statements and tax returns, and in some cases having good relationships with them. Because then you can go out and buy property with the unsecured money, either take it to a bank and get it refinanced, or take it to another lender and put someone in first position. And then suddenly you've got a property with long-term debt on it that's already making you money, and you have the exact same amount of money that you started with, or just a little less. And so you can go out and buy something else and do the same thing again. So having one chunk of unsecured debt is a really good way to go from being a small landlord to a medium landlord. And in fact, it doesn't necessarily have to be unsecured. It can be secured. You just don't want it to be secured with your investment property. It would be good to secure it with a second position mortgage on, say, the place that you live, or an option. Say, if you were granting an option for someone to buy a property at an under market rate, that'd be another way of securing a note. Notes can pay interest in a bunch of different ways. What we usually do is choose a rate. This is not my specialty. I only deal in private money, but my understanding is hard money rates are generally 12 to 14% or 10 to 12% with a point or 2 points. I would say private money is generally, in my experience, between like 7 and 10%. And then long-term debt, where somebody's wants to play the bank and hold in a particular property in first position, I can usually get at 6% or some 6 to 7%, just to give you an idea of what type of interest rates we're paying on this money. So two other types of partnerships that might be useful to you are equity shares. Most times when people are talking to me about partnerships, they're talking about equity shares. They're saying, me and my buddy both want to do real estate. We've each got half the money. We want to split things 50-50, or 60-40, or however you want to do it. Equity shares are a good way to make money and to do a partnership. But I always kind of caution people, or not caution, but advise people to think about whether there are certain parts of that partnership that might be more valuable to them and less valuable to the other person. An example, so splitting things 50-50 is great, but suppose one of you is a high earner and the other is a low earner, or maybe an entrepreneur who sold his company and now has very low income from year to year. The person who makes more as a W-2 employee in a given year would benefit more from the tax losses associated with a significant renovation project. And they ought to be able to give up more of the cash flow to the person who has low month-to-month income in exchange for more of the tax losses. So the idea is, in general, most people suggest, well, we're each going to bring 50-50 and we want everything to be split 50-50. Or we're going to each bring a third and everything should be split in thirds. But the truth is that owning a piece of real estate often has cash flow benefits, mortgage pay down, appreciation, tax losses, sometimes other things. Possession would be another legal right. And that bundle of legal rights, if you chop it up more finely, you ought to be able to create more value to divide those rather than just split them in half, because they should be worth different amounts to each of you. And so you can end up with a better deal if you kind of look at that more granularly. What type of person would want tax losses? People with big stock portfolios, capital gains, or fixed income. Real estate professionals. If you're a real estate professional, you can deduct losses against your active income. This is hugely valuable. If any of you have spouses that are working in like real estate adjacent industries, you should really consider whether they can qualify as a real estate professional. My wife manages all of our properties, and it makes a huge difference at the end of the year in terms of when you're doing a lot of valued add projects, to be able to write that off against my legal income. If you're a W-2 earner and you're actively involved in the management of the property, there's a special carve out where you can deduct up to $25,000 against your active income. That's what I call the carrot for people who want to dip their toe into real estate investment. So people who are bright people, they're consultants or executives or accountants, and they understand how real estate investment works and they want to be involved, but they don't want to do it entirely on their own. That can be a really attractive project for them. If you take them like a small multifamily project and say, hey, we're going to drop $200,000 into this year, there's going to be a big loss. And we're going to do a cost segregation study, and we think we can hand you a $20 or $25 or $30,000 loss in the first year. That will perk someone's ears up, even if they're not going to get a ton of cash flow at first. Having that loss is really valuable to them if they can understand. And what I always do is suggest they take it back to their CPA. What would a $25,000 loss look like for you at the end of the year? And there's some income limits on that too that you got to be aware of. But for some people, it's really attractive. On the flip side, young people always want cash flow in general because they're trying to grow their portfolio, and that makes perfect sense. The other thing I want to talk about is a shared appreciation note. Shared appreciation notes are really neat. I think they were invented by like big banks, or at least perfected by big banks like 20 years ago. They were more popular. But the idea there is, instead of getting paid an interest rate, if I were to loan money to someone, instead of asking for 8% on my money, I might take 4% and 10% of the appreciation as measured by the difference in the value of the property from the day that I make the loan to the date that it comes due. So if I were working with someone on a rehab project, maybe I loan them $50,000 at an under market rate at say 4%, but I expect that $50,000 will create $100,000 in increased value in the real estate. Then a 10% share in that appreciation might be a really nice kicker for me to bring home at the end of 5 years, as kind of an extra bit of money to earn on that note. Share appreciation notes are really good for people who are wealthy or who have a lot of capital gains. And then you can sometimes, depending on how you structure it, pay them back out with a refinance, which isn't a taxable event. And that they tend to like that. Syndications. You've probably heard a lot about syndications if you listen to any of the real estate bloggers, or not bloggers, excuse me, podcasters. They talk about this all the time. My experience with syndication is that it is simplified to kind of a dangerous and frightening degree on podcasts, and that people ought to be really cautious about getting involved in syndications. If you're hearing about syndications for the first time today, please don't do a syndication. Syndications are the easiest way to run afoul of SEC rules on fundraising. It's kind of jumping into like a 400 level partnership instead of starting at a 100 level where maybe you and one other person try and do a single family home. When you've got 10 people or 8 people who have pooled their money, it only makes sense to go after a big multifamily property because there's so much admin and overhead and personality conflict and accounting and legal costs and startup costs that you've got to hit a home run on that and really shoot for the moon to make it worth it. And I just think it's a tough way. It's very difficult to make the jump into syndication. And I've sort of intentionally avoided doing that because every time I look at it, I think it's just a big headache. And there's certainly ways to be successful at it. And I don't mean to discourage everybody, but just do your homework before you start working on a syndication. Yeah. So fundraising, I just had a couple of thoughts on fundraising, and I share these from a place of when I started the idea of asking people for money to do a real estate project. It terrified me. I was embarrassed to admit that I didn't have all the money that I needed to do the project. I felt like if I was afraid of rejection, that the person would just say, I would never lend money to someone like you. You're too inexperienced, or you don't have what it takes to get the job done. I was scared at the responsibility of having someone else's money and potentially not the project not turning out how I wanted or how they wanted and following through on my promises to them. So asking people for money and fundraising is hard. And the way that I finally started to get better at it is I talked to someone I knew who was a very successful fundraiser, but not in real estate. He raises money for a all boys boarding school in Virginia. One of the big ones, one of the more well-known ones. And I said, how do you do this? And what are your best tips about fundraising? And his suggestion was, don't talk about the fundraising, just talk about what you're going to achieve together. And when people get interested in the mission and they can visualize how to get there, the ask for the money comes very naturally from that. And so the focus should be 80% on what you're going to achieve together and 20% on what you need from them to get there. And so here's what I do when I have a fundraising call with someone, when I'm introduced to somebody. I bring them a proposal in writing. I feel like going and talking to someone about investing 5 or 6 figures with me, if I don't have something that's at least well thought through enough that I put together a written proposal, I think it's unreasonable for me to expect them to take it seriously. So I'll try and send something ahead of time and say, here's the basic structure. I walk them through it when I have the phone call. And then I follow up at the end. I always ask, do you have any questions and how can I answer those? And if I don't know the answer, I promise them that I will go look up the answer, and then I actually do that. And I think that really establishes a degree of trust and comfort with someone when I'm asking them for money. I also, as a matter of course, provide my tax returns and a personal financial statement. I just don't think it's right to hold out those things. If I'm asking someone to trust me with their money, I need to show them that I'm responsible with my personal finances and that, particularly if I'm personally guaranteeing it, I mean, they just need that information to make an informed decision. I introduced the team, and maybe for any of you, you are the team and there's nobody else. What I do in Chattanooga is it's me and my partner, Peter, who has the accounting firm or who had the insurance company. And then the third guy is a general contractor. And so between us, we feel like we've got a really good mix of skills that can create value opportunities for people to bring money to. And in part, that's because the two of them have a wholesale company. And so we're bringing the deal. And then I'll do the deal structuring, put together all the legal stuff. So we depress our legal costs. Ross does the construction element. So we get below market rates on renovations. And then they've also got Peter's got an insurance agency. So it's kind of a hub and spoke model where you're using a bunch of different companies to service the same group, the same assets. But that's the pitch for us is a hub and spoke. We say we try and do every part of this process from acquisition to running the property. We own the property management company too, 5% better than anybody else. And when you do that, or 5% better than the market, when you do that, everyone understands compounding returns, and 1.05 times to the 5th power ends up being a pretty significant difference, and you make more money. So that's the pitch that we make, and everybody's pitch should be a little bit different. You don't have to own every part of the deal. You don't need vertical integration and source the deal from like the beginning of the wholesale process. you can just be a great negotiator and get the deal 2 or 3% below what anybody else could have done, and then go from there. But introducing the team and what skills you have and being really open about what those skills are and how experienced you are, I think is really important. The first couple of times that I asked for money from folks, I said, these are the deals I've done personally. I've not done very many deals with these guys, but here's why I think it's going to work. And I had, on the deal that I did here in Charlottesville, when I was done with that, I made a binder and I made a list of everything I'd spent on the property and how much time I'd spent on all of it, and how it worked out financially. You know, what I got back on the refinance, what the appraisal was, how much value I had created. And then I took pictures of like before and after, and I've used that binder a bunch of times since then. Just sending it as a PDF and saying, hey, here's a project I've done. I'm capable of doing this. I've done it before. Would love to show you. If it's someone in Charlottesville, I'll offer to show them the property because I did a really good job on the renovation, and people are always impressed with it. But yeah, so that's one way to do it. You don't have to do that, but it's been useful to do it that way. Another thing I always do when I ask for money is to explain what could go wrong, and then to explain what I'm going to do to prevent that from happening. Most people who I talk to raise money for real estate projects are not real estate investors themselves, but they want to be. They think it's really cool and they want to do something with, but they're either so far in their career that they can't really take the time off, or they feel like they don't want to start from a standstill and buy the first property. So they want to participate, but they can't get going, and partnerships offer a way for them to do that. But I think it's part of my responsibility when you bring somebody into a new sector where maybe they're not that knowledgeable, to explain what could go wrong and what the risks are with real estate investment. And then also, you know, what I think I'm doing to prevent them from losing that money, to cover in the event that real estate values declined or the ARM from the commercial bank goes up a point. Are we still going to be able to cover all of our costs? So it's, you know, you don't want to terrify people, but I think it's important to talk about what could go wrong, and then show that you've thought that through and that you've got a plan to avoid that going wrong. And last is make it a relationship. It's way, way better to have one person who lends you a ton of money than it is to have 10 people who lend you one piece of on one note for like a year or two. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, there's compliance costs, there's tax and reporting costs, there's prospecting costs to even like get in front of somebody and ask them for money. It takes hours. You got to do the pitch. Some number of people that you ask for money are going to say no. And so having someone that says yes, that's satisfied with what you did, that can, and then be a resource for you. You know, I had people who we borrow very small amounts from, like $10,000, and then paid it back, or showed that we could pay it back, and they didn't want it back. You know, they said, take it again for another 6 months or another year. And in fact, I would like to loan you more. And so I think starting at a small amount and kind of building from there and building trust is the best way to go on fundraising, and just find a couple of people, you know, 2 or 4 people, 2, 3, 4 people that might be able to fund you for a long time. It is way better than trying to talk to 10 or 15 people and get a little bit of money from each one. You'll find also that some people are good lenders and some people are very anxious lenders. And I work very hard for anxious lenders, and I deliver them the best return that I can, but I just don't enjoy it as much as people who kind of have other things going in their lives, or not calling and asking for updates all the time. Risk factors. I just put these here to say, you know, real estate is risky. When you're using leverage, like I'm talking about, to buy real estate, it's doubly risky. And using this type of leverage is not appropriate for everyone, based either on temperament or financial circumstances, or any other reason. There's lots of reasons not to do it. You can do everything right on a deal like this, where you've raised 100% of the money, and mitigate your risk to the greatest extent possible, and still end up with a bad outcome due to law, regulation changes. I mean, I'm sure everyone's aware that there's a lot that's about to change. I'm sure people have talked about the 1031 rules changing, and a few other things. There was some good chatter in the beginning of this meeting about changes about criminalization of not renting to certain folks, the COVID, the pandemic, anything like that can really change the way an investment turns out. I can tell you that having some of these small multifamily projects when the pandemic began was terrifying. I didn't know what was going to happen. I took steps to try and mitigate. We built relationships with the neighborhood groups that had extra money to meet back rent. We're proactive and wrote to the tenants and said, how's this affecting you? What can we do? Let's get on a payment plan if you're in trouble. We escrowed extra money against vacancy, and all those things fortunately ended up working out. But no one could have seen the pandemic coming, and sometimes like that happens. And I think that's just the agony and the ecstasy of real estate investment. That type of stuff happening and having that effect on your investment is why you can become so wealthy doing this. But it's also easy to lose money. And then finally, the worst risk of all is unscrupulous people. You need to protect yourself and your teammate or your partner by using a partnership agreement, an operating agreement, a note, preferably secured if you're the lender, and just get stuff in writing, because it's an easy way for things to go wrong. I've litigated a few of those cases, and they're very unpleasant when business partners kind of turn on each other. I think that's everything that I had, other than I'll take a quick look at the chat and see what's there. I did want to invite anybody who wants to talk more about real estate to contact me here at evan@baileycapital.net. I have been the beneficiary of a ton of time and attention from more experienced real estate investors. People have been doing it for way longer than me. I mean, decades. And so I'd like to pay that forward when I can, which was part of my idea to talk to Chase and see if I could participate on this. And then it wouldn't be complete without a plug for my legal work. So if you know anybody who's been defamed or had a bad outcome from a medical malpractice event, bad surgery, or a personal injury case like a tractor trailer wreck or something, I love to work on that type of stuff. And if you call me to talk real estate, there's never any charge. I love talking real estate, and I do it all the time for free. But don't send me a legal question to evan@baileycapital.net, because I won't answer it. Only legal questions to my legal email address, please. And anything real estate can come the other way, and I will get to it usually within a couple hours. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat box. Okay, subject two, easy enough. So subject two is, for those who don't know, is a method by which you kind of skirt the due on sale clause, or at least like roll the dice with the due on sale clause. In general, big banks put in their deeds of trust or mortgages that if you ever sell the property, they can call the note due. You can sell the property without them realizing it, because there's millions and millions of mortgages in the United States, and there's no real good way for banks to follow up on that. Follow up on the fact that the property's been transferred, and they don't check the recordings at the courthouses and that sort of thing. The most important thing for the bank is that the mortgage continues to be paid. And so if you sell a property that you have a mortgage on, you sell it subject to, and the person who buys it subject to, knowing that the mortgage is still in place and it's not free and clear, then what happens then is that if you keep paying the mortgage, usually the bank won't call the note due. It's a risk. People who are doing this, I can't quantify the risk. It's probably too much for me. I wouldn't spin up a business buying stuff subject to, but from time to time, in the right circumstances, it can be a good tool. The way that banks typically find out if you sold a property subject to and they call the note due is when people either double insure or they let the insurance lapse. So this is what people always screw up on subject to. When you sell a property subject to, what you need to do, or what I would recommend as a best practice, but not legal advice, is that you get the username and password for the person who pays the mortgage. If they don't have it set up, get them to set it up and provide it to you. And then you log in and pay the mortgage on that website exactly the way that you did it before. If suddenly a bank has been getting paid out of a certain checking account with Lawrence Johnson from the mortgagee, then suddenly they get a check from Bailey Capital for the same amount, but it's a check and it's not through the online portal. Sometimes that can raise questions. So it's best to continue paying exactly as it was being paid before to avoid having the due on sale clause triggered. And then the other thing is insurance. What usually happens here is that as soon as the person sells the property, they'll cancel their insurance because they don't want to pay it anymore because it's not their property. This is okay and understandable, but if the property is uninsured, the bank will know that. They'll get a cancellation of insurance notice. It's part of the contract in the deck pages. And that's why when you bought the property, you had to add them on as an additional insured, and that they would have notice if the insurance was ever canceled. So what you need to do is either get another insurance policy in place, and generally you want as an additional insured the person who sold you the property, because insurance companies are sneaky and they will sometimes deny you insurance if you were the insured and not the owner under which the mortgage was issued. So it should be you plus the person that sold you the property, and ideally the person who sold you is the primary insured and you're an additional insured, and then as another additional insured it should be the bank with the underlying mortgage. And they'll get a notice that there's new insurance, and they don't really raise their eyes at this or their eyebrows as long as it's insured. Where people get into trouble is if it's double insured, the bank will find that out more often than not, and the insurance companies will fight with each other over who's responsible for a loss, and sometimes neither of them pay it, or if they do, it's after years of litigation. So that's very bad. And then obviously having an uninsured property, depending on your risk tolerance, is not the greatest either. So that's my brief little spiel on subject to. The only other thing I'll say is they're particularly good deals if you can find someone who's really far into the amortization cycle for a particular mortgage. So the reason that we did a subject to deal a couple of months ago was because we found someone who wanted very little money to walk away from her house. She felt like there was a lot of maintenance, deferred maintenance, which there was. But she basically just wanted $1,500 to go and go back to renting. It was easier for her than trying to keep up with the maintenance of the house. But she was 7 years into a 25-year mortgage. So the amount of principal that we're paying down every month on that is pretty significant, and we were happy to have that opportunity. And she was happy to walk away with that amount of money and not deal with any of the deferred maintenance. So I wouldn't do a subject to deal on something that's a year or two into the amortization. I don't think it would make a ton of sense, but if you get something that's 5, 6, 8, 10 years in, it can be a great way to pay down the mortgage in a hurry. I think I'll stop there, and sorry I went so long. I didn't realize I had so much to say on some of those slides. I told Chase it'd be 25 minutes and I doubled it. So thanks to everybody who stuck around. Looks like we lost a few soldiers along the way.
Well, we're supposed to gain a couple here too, but yeah, thanks again for taking the time to speak on everything. Does anybody have any questions too? We didn't really have much pop up in the chat, but if you want now, you could just unmute yourself and run something by Evan while we have him here. Legal advice, anything real estate related. One question I have, just as we continue the subject too, maybe some people are brainstorming, is so from the buyer's perspective, you kind of went through the whole process if you were selling it subject to. What are some of the best ways that you would mitigate that? I know you talked about a little bit with the online portal. Is there not really much else you can do and you're kind of just taking that risk, or any other maybe tidbits there for that strategy?
That's a really good point. So you kind of put your finger on another facet of it that I completely forgot. When you're buying subject to, you really ought to send a letter every month, or at least upon their request, showing that you're going to continue to pay the mortgage. So when you sell a property subject to, the mortgage stays on your credit. It can be hard to get another mortgage if you want to. And if ultimately the people you sold the property to don't pay, the person, the seller is still responsible. They're the ones who sign the personal guarantee on that mortgage. So if you're going to buy subject to, it's best practice to show the person that's still holding the mortgage that you're following through and doing what you said you'd do, which was pay the mortgage every month on time, and provide them, proof of it. And if you're selling on subject to, make sure that the person you're selling it to is trustworthy and going to follow through on that. And then I would probably write into the contract that it's a condition of the sale, or maybe liquidated damages or something, that they provide that to you on a monthly basis, because I would not want to be wondering whether or not the mortgage got paid and I'm suddenly going to get a notice in the mail from the bank that they're accelerating the amounts due.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like that's a strategy where it can go very well until it goes very wrong with, the way the insurance is set up and different things if the bank were to come get you, because
I
it could
can't
be
imagine.
headache quick.
I mean, it just seems like a nightmare trying to keep all of it straight, but there are people who do it and do it successfully.
Yeah. Any other questions for Evan? If not, we can just start to open it up to just basically networking where everybody can chat, get to introduce themselves a little bit. And
I have a quick question. This is Kevin. Hey, Evan, thanks for doing this, man. Hey, I guess two questions. What has your criteria thus far been for reselling? I mean, it sounds like you're a buy and hold guy as of right now. Do you have any criteria you're going to use to start selling?
Yeah. So that's a little ways down the road. Part of the reason I don't sell is that I'm a terrible flipper. I always go over budget, and I just know myself, and I can't make any money doing that. Both of my partners are more successful with it, and they'll do some flips on the side. Certainly, we could sell some of the stuff that we've done big renovations on. In Chattanooga, generally, you can sell rental properties in B and C neighborhoods, which is what we buy, at 1%, 100 times the monthly rent. So if it rents for 800, I can get 80 grand for it. On the MLS, on a private buyer's list from their wholesale, maybe you get 70, something like that, 65. It doesn't make a ton of sense for us to sell those things now because we got accelerated depreciation and tax treatment that is gonna come over the next like 3 to 5 years. So I want to hold those and get kind of milk all the depreciation out of it that I can, and then sell it. So the exit strategy is build that up to about 200 or 250 units. That's about when BlackRock Capital will pick up the phone, and then sell that to an institutional investor at a much more attractive multiple than what we bought at. If you get around like 100 or 150, like you can sell that to some people, but getting up over the 200 or 250 mark kind of opens the door to a bunch of the institutional investors who want to add a tranche of properties in a place like Chattanooga. You'll take a little bit of a haircut. It won't be as good as selling the whole thing on the MLS, but you'll also have much lower transaction costs. And you don't have to deal with 100 different buyers and that sort of thing. But that's the idea, is just try and scale for 4 more years, and then try and sell it. Although now that we've got the little satellite companies, or some portion of us do, we kind of own those in different amounts and proportions. In 5 years, I'm not sure it'll be worth selling because you're making money on insurance and lawn care and repairs and property management. So I hope a good choice either way.
Gotcha. And then when you're looking at your multifamilies, I guess 5 and higher, are you strictly looking at cash flow analysis, or do you consider cap rate at that point when you're doing those analysis?
Yeah. So we look at cap rate. Like most of the money we borrowed at 10%, right? So that means that we need to achieve a cap rate in excess of 10% to create any cash flow for ourselves. And we usually assume like 10% vacancy, 10% maintenance, 10% property management. We get a little better deal than that because we own the property management company. And then, taxes and insurance is usually another 10%. So we find the operating expense ratio is between like 40 and 45%. And then about 50% of the money goes to private money loans. So there's 5% cash flow maybe. And then when you take it to a bank and refinance it, you drop the monthly payment on that by quite a bit. And then we start making money. So cap rates, I try and get we calculate cap rates on everything, and we try and get at least 12%.
Even your single families, you're doing cap rate on?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, most people use cap rates for multifamily. It just works for what we're doing because we're 100% leveraged when we buy that stuff. If you're using any financing, cap rate becomes kind of a messy metric.
Right.
And then we obviously calculate the cap rate over the whole portfolio, and that gives you a good marker of the health of what you're doing, whether you're making money or losing money.
And are you doing like a 12? You're saying a 12% cap rate. Is that your going in cap rate, or is that your stabilized cap rate?
Yeah, when we buy it going in. Yeah.
Okay. I guess having a wholesale company really helps fund with those deals, huh?
Yeah, that's true. Although, like we've bought from other wholesalers, what has happened a couple of times is we've bought something from somebody and then they've introduced us to somebody else who sold us something. So that's not the only place that we've gotten deals, but they're probably the best deals that we've gotten have been through that. The other part of your question, Kevin, was what's the buying criteria? And generally, I look at 1.5% of the purchase price in monthly rent per month, or in monthly rent. So, if we're buying it for 100, I want to get 1,500 a month in rent.
Are you able to do that in Charlottesville and Harrisonburg?
Not in Charlottesville or Harrisonburg, no. In
Yeah, okay.
Charlottesville, I'm lucky to get 0.8%.
Right, right.
But I buy it for different reasons. Like Charlottesville weathered the 2008 recession amazingly well. Based on everybody I've talked to who was here and looking at the property values, there was a reduction, but it wasn't anything like it was in some other places. And so I tend to think that this is a good place to live in Harrisonburg too, and properties will be worth more in the future than it is now. So I don't buy for cash flow here. I just try and park money here and get appreciation that I'm not paying taxes on, and look for other markets for the cash flow.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
I would love to find some cash flow properties here if you know of any.
Yeah, totally. If I do, I'll be sending them to you and asking for a partnership.
Matthias are both realtors. They should have the deal. You saw the PowerPoint slides. Brokers and realtors, they've got the deals.
That's right. I've got a few. I just been diversified in other activities in my life. Actually, one of those I'm getting ready to retire from, so I'm going to be able to hit this much more full swing here soon. But
cool.
That's
maybe
crazy.
calling you.
Finding any multifamily or commercial residential investment property that's at a 10 cap and it's not in the middle of a war zone or nowhere, it's very hard to find right now. Things are trading at like 7 caps or even lower, depending if they have value add and stuff, especially here in Harrisonburg. I'm sure Charlottesville's even worse. But
Yeah, the general contractor is a really good negotiator. That's another thing I'm not great at on real estate. Like I can negotiate contract terms, but on real estate, like I won't push for the extra 1 or 2 or 3% off. And he always does that, and it adds up when you are buying 10 or 20 or 30 units a year.
Yeah,
I delegate on that.
I love your team structure. That sounds like an awesome, full panoply of everything that you need. It's awesome.
I thought that at first, and then it's become more clear in the last couple of weeks that we really need someone who's stronger at operations, because the guy who's the entrepreneur, the insurance agency, his brother runs like a 400-person factory, and he looked at what we were doing and he was like, "You guys are stupid. Like this is so inefficient, and here's a much better way to do it." And he gave us like a Kanban board and all that. And I thought, oh, I didn't even realize we were kind of in the Stone Age on that. I mean, we were getting stuff done, but that's not in any of our backgrounds. And so it's good to be reminded sometimes and humbled that there's a lot of talents out there that none of us have. And having somebody come in and kind of poke a hole in your plan is super valuable.
Yeah, it's tricky too when you're trying to split everything. If you bring in another person on, you got to grow more in order to have it make sense for everybody. That's a little tough.
That's true. He was nice enough guy to help out his little brother and did it unpaid, which was really nice, but he did such a good job that I kind of wanted to make him an offer to keep helping out. But yeah, I mean, I think that just goes back to partnerships. Like when I was being greedy and trying to keep every bit of everything I own for myself, I only got so big. And then when I started giving it away and trying to be useful and relying on other people and being more trusting, that's when I really started to grow as a real estate investor. And I really believe in that. There's a ton of good books about it. The Go Giver is one, and abundance mentality and all that, but that's been 100% true in my life.
Hey, Evan, this is Kevin again. What's funny is no real estate guru has ever said the opposite of what you just said. They all say that same thing. So it's so true. You're right. Hey, another question for you. When you do go to the banks, I guess I'm presuming you're owning everything. You don't own anything in your own name. Are you ever able to lock in on 30-year money?
So I can get 30-year money now from a bank in Austin called Visio. And they do true asset-based lending. If you shoot me an email, I'll connect you with the lender there. I just started using them 6 weeks ago.
Wow.
So before that, I used Virginia National Bank, and I used them for one reason: is they would let me leverage the hardest. I could go 15% down on investment properties. I think they've just changed their underwriting standards and they only do 20% down now, so they'll do 80% LTV. Visio is something similar to that, but the nice thing about Visio is they don't look at personal tax returns or personal DTI or anything like that. So doing value add projects and losing money is great on your tax returns, but it turns out the next year the bank is like, why are you losing so much money in your real estate empire? It's growing and everything's
Right.
going. So Visio doesn't even look at that. They just underwrite it strictly based on the asset. You pay a premium interest rate. I think, their interest rates are like 5%, 5.5. Gavin told me he got like 3% or 3.25, something crazy the other day. So it's not competitive from that perspective, but the farther along I go in real estate, the more I don't really care about the interest rate. It's not really that big of a deal. Rates are historically low and people would have killed for 6%, 10, 12 years ago. So that's not such a big deal to pay a little extra. You do still have to personally guarantee it with Visio, but there's no getting out of that really until you get your projects.
So they're okay with you owning the property in an LLC, and they'll give you 30-year money. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Banks will always let you own in a LLC as long as you guarantee it. I mean, to them, it makes no difference at all. They want the guarantee. It's just except you can't get Fannie or mortgages.
Exactly. That's what I've been running into. So I had to actually move some of mine out of LLCs into back into my personal name, which I didn't like doing, but I needed to lock down, and I just got really aggressive about paying off stuff. And then as I pay them off, now I'm moving them back to LLCs. But I'd rather just go the way you went. It'd been easier.
Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, you want the 30-year amortization because it improves cash flow, right? It cuts So another way you might look at that is what's the next step beyond a 30-year mortgage, or is a 40, right? But what about beyond that? Just find someone who will do an interest-only loan for you. There would be someone for whom that'd be an attractive proposition to sit in first position and have you pay interest only with like a 5 or 6-year balloon, where they wouldn't want any of the principal back, like if they couldn't find another investment. Particularly if they think that the interest rates are going to continue to go down, locking in like a 6 or 7% interest rate for 5 or 6 years might be a great option. I don't have anyone who's financed one for me like that right now, but I did have something like that. And I paid it off doing something else, but
And I've got a couple interest only loans from private individuals, nothing major, like a 50,000. And I was supposed to go 5 years, went 5 years. And now here we are at year 15, and they just keeps rolling 1 year each time because they're making good money. They don't care. And just like you said, they're just sitting there with it. But I'll definitely be contacting you about Visio and Virginia National.
Make that connection. And you ought to ask,
appreciate it.
We got that 30-year. I'm not sure you told me, or I'm not sure I asked.
I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Say again.
I said, and you might want to ask Gavin too. I think he got a 30-year from somewhere. I can't remember where.
Okay. Gavin.
Yeah, he's in the chat. Gavin Huffman.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
How's it going? Evan, first of all, congratulations for smashing through that barrier. A few years ago, I kind of bounced up against that debt to income and ended up falling backwards by just kind of selling the properties and cashing out, and was able to accumulate some capital and do some flips and stuff. And it's kind of fun, but you just kind of pay more taxes and transaction costs. And so I'm trying to get back into the more of the investment side. But Gavin, myself, I'm very bankable, but my LLC is not. So it's kind of a barrier there. It seems like most of the hard money lenders, they'll only lend to an entity. That first property, did you have the property first, or did you find the investor first? And did you go in as an entity on that one?
You mean the first 6 unit in Chattanooga?
Was that the first one you used the private money on?
Yeah. So on that one, that was we found the property and loved the property and went out and raised the money. I find that's always easier. Like at this point, there's enough deals coming in, even stuff that is not a great deal, but it's a good deal. We know we'll make money on it, that I can kind of fundraise on an ongoing basis, and that works. That wouldn't have worked when I started. Like when I started, I needed more confidence, and the confidence came from having a specific deal and saying, this is how it's going to work, and I know it'll work. Now I kind of sell the business model. I say, here's what our talents are, and here's what we've done, and will you invest in this business, as opposed to taking a particular property and asking them to invest in that. But that's how it started, and I think that is the best way to start, because it's hard to really pitch with conviction if you don't have your teeth and your arms around exactly what you want to do with a specific property and what the plan is, whether it's like a management problem or a construction element, or it's undervalued for some reason. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked. And that was the video game guy. I played League of Legends with that guy 10 years ago, and we became like really good buddies. And he went and got a great job and has made a great deal of money and done really well in the stock market, but wanted to get into real estate, but he works 70 hours a week. And so I just said, look at this cool building. We flew down there, and he lives in Nashville. So I showed it to him. We met down there, and he said, this sounds cool. Thanks for introducing me to your partner. Let's do it. And I think he loaned us like $110,000 to do that. And we brought like 70 or 90 and 70, something like that.
You talked about the concept where someone lends you some money, and if you pay them back, it can quickly snowball. Do you think maybe if you had, say, a free and clear rental property, it would be a good way to kind of start a relationship, because you could borrow money from someone against that property, a small amount, a tailored term, and just kind of start.
Yeah, that's great. I think that works wonderfully well, and particularly if you've owned it for a while. I mean, having a free and clear property at all is a fantastic tool for lending, because you can move people on and off that, put it in first or second position. You can assign the rents if it's an investment property, which is really nice and always makes people feel good. If it's just a primary home, I mean, it's great to foreclose, but most people don't want to be bothered with that, but they would like to have the rent coming from an investment property. So yeah, I think that's great. And particularly if you've owned it for a while, when I'm using a piece of property to collateralize a loan, I always feel, or I imagine that the person will feel more confident if they saw like, here's 2-year PL profit and loss statements from this property. It's one thing to show them something you've had for 3 months and say, here's what it's worth based on the appraisal or the sale price. But to see how it's performed over 2 or 3 years and feel confident that it will continue to perform that way, that's a really good piece of collateral.
And did you say you try to keep one investor per property, because the more you don't want to add more and more, because it just gets complicated and then you have to think about the SEC?
I guess I was kind of making that suggestion that when people start with a partnership, they just try a single person partnership instead of 3 people. Because I've been in a few different partnerships now, and it's definitely more complicated with 3 people, even if I mean, it's like the dynamics of the 3 astronauts who went up in whatever that was. Like they were worried. They never sent 3 astronauts up because they were worried that 2 would gang up on 1. Somebody always ends up being the lone holdout on a particular issue. But yeah, I mean, 3 is just more complicated. You got to balance more competing desires. And the more people you have in a given LLC, the more people have to personally guarantee it. Generally, the rule is if you own 25% or more of the LLC, you must be a personal guarantor for a bank to lend. And doubling up on personal guarantee sucks. You don't get anything in addition for it, and it eats up more of your DTI. So, if 2 people are gonna pledge, and then on the next one, just cut the 3rd person in and somebody else out, and then he pledge or be the guarantor on that one, and you can stretch your DTI much farther. You can accumulate more stuff. The guarantor game is such a pain. The bank. Why when you have 24%, do you not need to be a guarantor? But when you have 25, suddenly like you gotta put up the money. Nothing has changed. Like it's 1% difference. So what we have done from time to time is have somebody be at 24% with an option to buy more down the road, so that they don't have to guarantee. And banks will, they don't love that, but they don't call the loans. I mean, my experience is they'll just be like, oh, well, okay. If they're happy with the guarantors that you started with, they've got to be happy with it 6 months down the road if you sell more of the company to someone else.
It's a lot of good stuff. Everybody's quiet. Anybody else have any questions that haven't spoke yet, or just want to chat and network with each other a little bit too? Because we're at the end here. We've got, a few more minutes, but before we wrap up. I think you did such a good job speaking, Evan, that people literally don't have any questions whatsoever. You've answered all fundraising questions for
I
me.
wish that was true. I think a few people got bored. Unfortunately, I couldn't look at people's faces and look at my PowerPoint, so I just started trying to speed through it. But
The only time people hopped off was after you finished with your whole slideshow and everything. So
very good.
Definitely. I was just going to say that I would definitely feel like I could watch that like 3 times and gain new insights from what you said. It's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like I've got a lot of information about, well, I'll put it this way. After we kind of built the company, it was mostly done. We showed it to this guy and asked how we could make it bigger. And he was a big time syndicator in Nashville. And he said to my friend, Peter, you're on the verge of doing what every idiot wants to do, which is buy small multifamily at scale. And so we've kind of always thought that was a funny way to describe something we put a ton of time and attention to, something every idiot wants to do. Yeah, I mean, small multifamily, it's got its struggles. Like I don't want to lionize the asset class at all. You never get the economies of scale that you do with bigger multifamily. The tenants can be difficult sometimes. Multifamily tenants want services. Single family tenants tend to want to be left alone, and I like tenants who want to be left alone. So there's definitely been some growing pains. I don't mean to suggest that it's been smooth sailing the whole time. And when you're highly leveraged, there's not a lot of room for error. But if you also feel like the business plan is good and at its core it's working, and you do a couple of deals and you can see that it's working, then you just kind of push past some of those frustrating parts when you go over budget or something and there's not any money like there should be for the next deal. You got to raise more, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Evan, for your multifamilies that happen to have one water meter, have you bought into any of the services that kind of divvies them up for you, or are you just using the ratio distributed method?
Yeah.
You're just paying yourself.
I actually don't even do either of those. What I usually do is just build it into the rent, which is not great. It's a moral hazard. I know they use more water because I do it that way. But it's just been such a hassle. And I've been so concerned about the regulatory nature of charging for utility services, which can be a big problem. I know that you can do the RUB system, ratio utility billing system, and then I know you can do the sub-metering. But it just hasn't, I don't think I have a property that's big enough that I'd really make a ton of money off doing it. The biggest thing we have is a 12 unit. That's got 3 water meters. That one might be worth it. But yeah, there's just been other stuff, more low hanging fruit to try and eke out a little bit more cash flow. Been on my list for a year and I've just never pulled the trigger on it.
So I've done the RUB system for years, and I guess I've gotten into a habit of I can knock it out. I do it myself. I'm my own property manager. I do it myself, and I can knock it out probably in 15 to 20 minutes. So it's not that big of a deal to get $250 back, I guess. But I still am always talking to guys like you who may have already went with one of these metering companies to see if it's worth it or not. So
I always just felt like they're not going to pay it, like that they already pay me a rent, and maybe that's wrong. Like maybe, if you get a bill in the mail, you pay it, but I just felt like it was doubling my collection risk. But I'm happy to hear that you've had a good experience with it and you're kind of making.
I'd say probably 1 out of 10 people are habitually a problem about it. And now what you cannot do is you cannot turn the water off. Now, I don't understand why, because the utility company could turn their water off, they'll pay it, but we can't go downstairs in the basement or whatever if it's a duplex and turn one valve off, that because they didn't pay it. So other than that, I do get my couple $100 back, and I think it makes them more beholden to not just leave the water running nonstop.
The water is very high. I've noticed that from time to time, but that's a good idea. You kind of reignited my interest in getting that done. I'm glad you brought it up.
And you can do it based on, the code allows you to do it based on number of bedrooms or number of people. I always do it on number of people, just because it might be one person living in a 2-bedroom. So that gets a little. I tell you why. Actually, I tell you why I do like that though, because then the neighbors start telling on each other for the multifamilies, when a bunch of people are living next door, and they're like, "Well, they got 5 people over there now." I'm like, "What do you mean they got 5 people?" So it's kind of a second order effect.
You have like a form or a template, or do you use a service to send electronically? How do you actually? What are the nuts and bolts?
I mean, I can send you. No, I do it myself when I get the bill. I just have an Excel spreadsheet that auto calculates it and based on the percentages.
Cool.
And then I have a contract that they sign, a 1-page water rub agreement, and it just basically goes through. Just real simple. I mean, it's nothing major, but I'll definitely send it to you.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll send you the Vizio link.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Bailey Alford, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah. Sorry, I only got to hear bits and pieces. I wasn't because I was bored. I was in between showing, so I got to keep leaving.
Right on. What kind of real estate investor are you?
Noob. Yeah, I'm actually with Funkhauser, the same real estate brokerage that Jason and Matthias are with.
Great.
So I'm helping them out with stuff and learning from them. So
Very good.
yeah. Thanks for doing this. What I heard was excellent.
I was happy to do it. I saw someone else I knew do it, and I got jealous. I was thinking, how come he gets?
Yeah. I was thinking, since you don't have your water individually metered, get some inflatable kiddie pools and drop them off.
Good. Throw a wrench in what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
It's character.
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, what would you suggest for someone who's a noob? I'm 19 on commission pay, so like pretty much the worst for banks.
Yeah.
So do you have any words of advice for getting started?
How long have you been working?
In real estate, I got my license in October.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone like a mortgage lender could probably coach you through that process, but I think you're probably 9 months away from having a track record that a bank would lend on.
Oh, really? Cool.
The sick part is you don't really need to save up that much money to control a bunch of units. I mean, you could get a 3% down loan on a quadplex if you wanted. And I've always thought that was the best way to get started. And I wish I had known that. I was already married when I bought the townhouse and kind of started, but I would have done that 3 times in 3 years or 3 times in 5 years and been at 12 units a lot faster. That's what I would suggest. Or maybe just aim your sights on a duplex and see how you like it instead of jumping in. But something you could fix up too. Commission income is tough, but if you go home and hammer on the house at night, you're kind of creating equity. So you're making money, whether you sold anything that month or not. So that might be a way to kind of smooth out your income and have a little bit more predictable value generation on a month-to-month basis.
Cool.
It's not all that hard. I mean, I think YouTube has leveled the playing field so much in the trades. Anything you could conceivably want to learn about working on a house, you can Google and look in YouTube. That's
cool. My dad's a contractor, so I've always helped him with stuff. I actually used to paint for a living. That's why I got into real estate, because I hated that so much. Yeah. So, yeah.
Take stock of what you got. You got contracting skills, and you got time, and you've got motivation, and you don't yet have a bankable income, but it's coming. And you don't have any debt, presumably. You don't. So you'll be a candidate for a 3% down loan. Work on your credit, and there's no reason you couldn't be at 2 or 4 or more units in a year or two.
Cool. Thanks for the advice.
One thing too, before I forget, Evan, you were talking about sub-metering everything. I know there are some services, I don't know how the breakdown of your units are, but that there are basically companies that will provide their own water meters. They read them, charge you a fee, which you pass through to your residents, and then it's like another bill, so you have to worry about them being charged twice, so to speak, from you. So that's one thought too. But then you're kind of changing over that power.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just to have it come from a different company. Yeah, you guys have pushed me. I think I've just been procrastinating on that, and you guys ganging up on me and telling me to do it. I'm the 3rd astronaut. I got to do it.
What's your water bill on the 12 unit? What is that a month?
Water. I just had QuickBooks open. I think we got 3 meters, and it's usually about like 150 on each meter, maybe 200. So like $50 a unit, somewhere around there. There was a leak for a while, so I think we hope that it'll go down. We finally got that resolved. But yeah, somewhere around there, like $400 or $500 a month.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, yeah, if you know, I'm sure Chattanooga is like everywhere else. If you just put that on a 7 cap, that's 103 grand.
Yeah.
You can get back through utility bill back.
7 cap's a little generous for beautiful Cleveland, Tennessee, which is like a suburb right outside, a little town right outside of Chattanooga. But
okay.
It would do something to build that back. I would love for the tenants to just pay the water, but in that class of C, and they're 1 bedrooms too, so there's a lot of turnover, and just trying to set up people to like, put down a deposit, $250 to get their water, and then turn it off and turn it back on in between tenants. It was so much more of a hassle than to just pay it and accept a little bit less money.
I think the RUB system works.
Yeah, or RUBs would be good.
Yeah,
I might implement that. The other thing is, like, as I get farther along in real estate, I'm less willing to squeeze every last dollar out of the stuff that I own, and I'm trying to make more dollar per hour that I spend thinking or doing or talking about real estate. And that's been really good. Like, it's good to squeeze every dollar out when you get started because you can kind of get terminal velocity. But now I try and be a little more efficient and spend more time with my family and that sort of thing, which is like kind of lame at a real estate meeting, but that's how it works for me. I get so angry at those Brazilian kids who just like quit in the middle of the game. They probably ran out of money at the video game cafe or whatever.
I think the most unbelievable part of your story is the fact that you made a friend playing League of Legends.
I understand that. Well, we bullied the other player, so we were both toxic.
What was your League of Legends friend local, or like how did you guys like meet in real life? Like,
yeah, so I didn't meet him like out of nowhere, but he was friends with my cousin, and I used to play League of Legends with my cousin, and then I started playing.
Cool.
He would play mid, and I was the jungler, so we were just super tight right away. I had to help him out.
Nice.
Yeah, that's really about it. Is there anything else? Anybody, any questions, or I mean, even if you wanted to share some accomplishments from this past week or anything?
I have a question. Do you have any? You might have already talked about it, but do you have like a favorite real estate book or business book?
Oh, so I guess the one that I'll recommend, because we were talking about notes, is there's this book by Jimmy Napier called Invest in Debt, and it's all about notes. It's a red book with white lettering. It's only about 100 pages long, and I read it at the beach like 2 years ago, and it really changed the way I thought about borrowing money and how that works. And it's not very expensive. I want to say it's like $7 or $8 on Amazon. Jimmy Napier, Invest in Debt. It was recommended to me by somebody on Reddit. I should have plugged myself. I should have plugged this community. I post a lot on the real estate investing subreddit. There's a lot of information there, and some good recommendations for books. But that's the one that I would recommend to you. If you can understand how to use things like loan constants, you can borrow money and then loan it back out at different rates with different terms, and make money just trading notes, which is something I would like to do when I get older and kind of want to slow down a little bit. Just doing notes investing is a great way to make extra income and be sort of still involved in real estate without some of the headaches.
Evan, what was that subreddit you said?
So it's reddit.com/r/real estate investing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a moderator on there, so
Oh, nice.
yeah, I get cursed at by people who think that they realized what they did.
Such as Reddit.
Yeah,
Reddit is wild.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask. Actually, I tried to ask on there if I could promote the show before it happened, but I was turned down. Yeah, I wasn't sure if like free meetups were considered self-promotion or not, but yeah.
Yes, self-promotion. Weird.
Yeah.
Main guy is very serious about self-promotion, and we just kind of follow along behind him. But I think it makes it a better community overall.
Yeah.
I respect promoters. I think it's incredible the abilities they have, but there sure are a lot of them in real estate, and it'd be nice if there were fewer.
Yeah. Like on some subreddits, there's like a what do you call it? Like, I guess a sub menu type thing where it's literally named just blatant self promotion, and you're allowed to do it on that part of it. But
I think we have that. We've got like the monthly checkup or monthly self promotion.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool.
Feel free to put them in there.
Cool. What's your username on Reddit?
I'll message it to you. I
Okay.
some of the things I put on Reddit, but I will message it to you.
All right. Yeah, I had to make a new account for real estate sub because my other account is just memes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should probably take that advice.
Does anybody know, did the utility companies, do they get kind of a free pass on the pandemic? They can still just shut off the power if the tenants don't pay? Just kind of starting to think about it now. It seems a little bit of a double standard, you know, as a landlord, your hands are tied, and the utility company just like, no heat.
I mean, there for a while they could not. I guess I had seen some notices saying they're going to get back to normal now. If that's being enforced again now, where they could not shut them off, I don't know. But I mean, if you think about it, landlords are the only ones getting stuck with like having to give free housing. They don't make people give free food at the grocery store. You know, that was one of the things we brought out in VAMA the other day. Well, actually, a couple months ago. It's like, hey, you guys are only picking on landlords. You're not picking on anybody else. It's not fair.
Yeah. Matthias, did you put the new YouTube link online? I think I might want to save this.
Yeah, I can get it to you. It's shared on our Facebook pages and it's on our website. So it will be on harrisonburgrei.com under meetups. It will be hosted there.
Okay, that's perfect. How long has this meetup been going on?
Year and a half, 2 years.
And did you have something
Kind of
revitalized, or did you build this from scratch?
We actually had two separate meetups. So Mateus had one and I had one, and then we joined probably a year and a half ago.
Are you jockeying for position?
What's that?
Are you jockeying for position? Is there any sort of like latent competition there?
Not really. I don't think so.
You guys would be good partners.
Huh?
You're not trying to outdo each other all the time or control the ownership of the RIA. You guys are working together.
Yeah, we had kind of a different setup and just joined together because it worked well.
Yeah, Gavin has been doing the yeoman's work in the Charlottesville meetup. I just have not been very good at attending that one at all. But I'm sure grateful that he keeps kind of plugging away and keeping it going.
I think the pandemic's made it tough because it seemed like more people were turning out when we had everything in person, and now it's easier for people to come out, and there's less turnout for some reason. And we've had some really, you speaking and other people these previous recent months. I mean, we've had some good speakers, and still the turnout's not what you'd expect. But
people want to network more, which they find, I guess, harder on Zoom.
Yeah, I think it's a little weirder too, to like try to network with somebody when you can just see their neck up.
Yeah, for sure.
It's seems a lot more attractive if you got a good speaker like Evan. I find that with the meetup, it's really easy to miss it. Like Chase, your previous one, I had the intentions of coming, and then I just missed it. It would be neat if there was an option where you could sign up for maybe a text blast or something. But
yeah, we're getting a little bit better about that, at least from the email standpoint, trying to remind people and whatnot. But it's it's a whole other job, and we can get pretty slammed with real estate. So we're trying.
We can make have time.
If the people really want to attend, they'll show up.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can start working on trying to get that set up with you guys if you want.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, Bailey's awesome. Bailey's very motivated.
And
Billy seems very motivated. I don't like painting either, so I can understand where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, painting and trying to get out of my parents' house. Yep.
That's the best rent-free place you'll ever live. I don't know.
Yeah.
I lived with my folks after a year after I got out of college. It was great. Saved up some money.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Ask your dad to do a partnership if he's a contractor.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Plug for him. We actually his business specializes in like apartment repaints. That's like all he does. So
What's it called?
Alfred and Sons.
Okay.
I can I'll message you.
I've been using for.
We don't.
But,
I don't think he has like a website or anything, but
yeah, I'll make a note. My painter flew the coop.
nice. Yeah, it's hard to keep. Yeah.
Is the Waynesboro RIA still going on? Have any of you guys been to that one lately that Ana Duarte runs?
no, I think it is still going on. I honestly used to go to all of them, like or try to go to all of them. I don't think I've ever been to Gavin's, but I've gone to one in Charlottesville. I used to go to Haymarket, Anna's in Waynesboro, but I just haven't been, since we've kind of done this past year, we haven't really gone to anything and just done our own thing. But I think she is. I thought I saw another post on Meetup app for her.
Are you still pursuing the mobile home parks, Chase, with your brother?
Yeah. We actually, it's right before the call, we had a call with a seller on one. So that's why I was shocked about your cap rates. Generally, cap rates for even mobile home parks are much more favorable than multifamily. And was looking at one, it was in a rural area and they were trying to sell it at like a 7 cap. And it's, something you'd expect to get at a 10 or higher, but it's just, real estate's crazy right now.
Yeah, I would say also the property manager that works on all our stuff is the best property manager I've ever seen. I mean, she just commands rents that I would not be able to ask with a straight face, and she gets it, and that makes a big difference. Like I said, kind of recognizing areas that I'm short in. I cannot get the highest rent because I just am not good at negotiating that way, and she is, and that really helps you on the cap rate stuff.
Is this down in Tennessee or here?
Tennessee, yeah. My wife
Okay.
does all of our property management here, so we can get the real estate professional classification.
Right.
Okay, so your wife's one doing the rents then. That's
Yeah.
okay.
You end up splitting that. Like sometimes I'll show it, sometimes she does it, but more often than not, I let her negotiate because she's just a tougher negotiator.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's why I was shocked that the going in cap rate of like 12% is just really good for multifamily. So what stabilized cap rates are you seeing for your portfolio?
So like, let me look at the 12. Do a little calculation here.
Because like if you talk to a broker and it's a strong metric and you're like, yeah, I'm looking for even if it's a decent mobile home park, I'm looking for a 10 cap, they're gonna be like, okay, you need to go look somewhere else.
Yeah. Let's see here.
We've got, I don't know if you guys have seen this one here in Luray, a 6-unit apartment building for sub 7 cap.
Have you seen that one in Shenandoah yet? It was like, I think it was 2 units, but it was also like a garage. I think
I sent it to me before.
Yeah, I think I sent it to you. I couldn't. It's not on Zillow, obviously. I just sent you the MLS number real quick. Then I realized, are you on Car?
I am on
for the MLS. Okay, yeah.
Is that Shenandoah town or Shenandoah County?
Shenandoah town, Page County.
What street? Do you know?
Let me pull it up real quick.
So I think I got that wrong on the 12 unit. I think we were at like 12 and a half or 13 stabilized. And what it was before was a total disaster. Like there were 4 units that were full and every other one was empty. And so, it was like, yeah, they weren't making any money at all. And we slowly leased it up the bat after.
Okay, yeah. So there's probably like a zero cap basically. Okay.
That's really it.
I thought you're like 12 on buy. I was like, that is insane. But that's still a really good cap rate on stabilized.
So I would say, 10 to 12 on buy is about what we get on the single family stuff or the duplex stuff. And then it comes a little better than that when we raise the rent. But yeah, I misremembered. It's, I think 12.9% when we got done on the 12 unit. So
we're generally like 8 cap is what we're looking for with value adds. That way we just have a cash on cash is what we look for as our main metric for acquisitions. But it's like single family, we're at roughly 15 to 20% cash on cash, and then which comes out to about 1.5%. And then for commercial, we're just trying to get to 20% cash on cash by the end of year one. It's which is hard to find.
Yeah. So that's about what I can do in Charlottesville. Aside from that first deal where I cashed all that money out and did all that work myself. Like if I get 15% here, I feel like I've done pretty well.
Yeah.
A couple that perform better and a couple that are a little below. But yeah, I think here or Charlottesville, anything over 10% is a pretty good buy. In my opinion.
Do you live in Charlottesville, Evan?
Yeah, I guess I technically live in Albemarle County.
Okay.
Like Piedmont Community College.
Cool. The address of that place in Shenandoah is 412 Maryland Ave.
Nice.
Yeah, it's they're asking 350. It has 2 units and it's like a garage, 3-bay garage.
Yeah, I'm just doing it for comps. I got a 3-plex down there and 450 cool. For a 2-plex. That makes me feel good.
350.
350. It still makes me feel good for sure.
That's really good.
I'm surprised if it goes that high.
I got one more idea for you while we're just spitballing about things you could do to make money. Find an older investor who's sick of managing and master lease the property from them. So rent it from them at a lower amount than what they're getting now, but say that you'll be responsible for all the tenant, placing the tenant, you'll cover vacancy and you'll cover any maintenance up to like $100 a month. And try and get a lease for like 3 or 4 or 5 years where they're not going to have to worry about it anymore and they'll make a little less money. But you can be assured of it. I would not have contemplated doing something like that now, but like 5 years in, if someone came to me with the right offer on that, I would say, oh, please, yes. Like if I could just lock in and not have to worry about turning the unit over every year. And there are people who are busier than me and particularly people who are in their 40s or 50s. So if you can manage, like that's often what a young person can bring to the table and create money out of nothing. You wouldn't have to put any money in.
What did you call that?
So there's different names for it. You can call it a master lease.
Master lease.
The most popular name. And if you want to look up David Tilney, he's a really good expert on that topic.
David Tilney, you said?
Tilney, Tilney. You could also call it a lease with an option to sublease, was what some people call it, or a lease with a right to sublease. And then sometimes you'll see people call it a lease option, which isn't exactly right. They're 2 separate things. It's just that oftentimes when you master lease a property from someone, you also want to buy an option for different reasons. But if I were you, I wouldn't fool with that part. I would just try and master lease a property from someone. And it's actually, you could send out a ton of offers that way. Like just go on Hotpads or whatever and find something that's been up for rent for like 45 or 60 days or longer and just start messaging those people and say, hey, would you entertain a long-term lease at 75% of what they're asking for? I'd like to turn around and lease it for more and be responsible for management. And I bet you someone will say yes, and you would only have to put in like a month's rent to start.
Does that have?
Yeah.
Well, since you're licensed, you don't have to worry about it. I was going to say I didn't know what the property management repercussions would be for that.
You can't property manage for someone without a license, but a master lease is different. Like you have the right to rent it yourself. So you step into the shoes of the owner, and you don't need a license to do that. So that's how people without property management licenses also often run little shady property management companies. They master lease everything and just keep the spread between what they did and what they are ultimately able to.
Yes. Gotcha. Yeah.
One deal like that in Harrisonburg, and I did it more as like kind of a thought experiment than anything. But that lady became one of our lenders for Bailey Capital in Chattanooga, because we had formed a good relationship over the course of the master lease, which was it's for 5 years. I'm halfway through it, and so when we spun this up, I was like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing." And she said, "You've always done what you said you do on the master lease. You know, I have some money. Would you like to use it?" So. I just mentioned that there's like sometimes you start with that, and then down the road, someone will owner finance that house to you, or they'll tell you about another property they have that they want to sell at a really good price. Like so, forming the relationship, it's not always what meets the eye. You know, there's opportunities that come down the road from having that business relationship with someone.
Yeah. For your master leases too, out of curiosity, if you did them where you had a buyout option, would you generally structure it to where every payment you have for that master lease goes towards the purchase? Is how that you generally have those?
On that one, I put in $5,000 up front. I gave her $2,000 for option consideration, and then I used $3,000 to do some deferred maintenance. And then I rent for $560, and I turned around and rented it for $870. So I clear like $310 a month on that. I made my money back in the first year and a half. And then I think I get $100 a month as an option credit against the price. So it's for 5 years, or no, it's $150 a month of my 560 gets credited against the option price if I ever exercise it. So over the course of 5 years, what is that? $1,800, $9,000 off if I exercise the option, which I'll do. And the cool part about that business is that woman has so enjoyed just having that money and not having to fool with any of the stuff associated with the property is she was like, when you exercise the option, I want to owner finance it to you. So I'm not even going to have to go to a bank on that, which is great because I'm losing all kinds of money in real estate on paper. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to take off. I've actually got another meeting at 8 o'clock. But Chase and Matthias, thank you so much for letting me come on. I really enjoyed it, and I will try to get back and do more. I was trying to come and just be a listener and network with people a little bit more. I really appreciate you creating this platform for everybody to benefit.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to speak, and sorry for kind of holding you so late. We had a lot of random questions and good things.
I want to stay as long as I can. That's why I waited till the last minute. So I really enjoyed it. And Gavin, it was great to see you. Kevin and Bailey, nice to meet you guys too.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
All right. Well, is there anything? I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. There's nothing we really need to go over before the next one, right, Matthias?
Yeah, I know.
So the next one, third Wednesday of the month, as always, would be February 17th. We don't really have anybody lined up at the moment to guest speak. So if you have somebody that you know be really good, you really like to hear them, send them our way, shoot us a message, and we can try to see if they can come speak either, this coming month or the next time. If not, we'll have a topic lined up here in the next week or two and have all those emails sent out to give you guys a heads up. Anything else I'm forgetting before we sign off, Matthias?
No, I think that covers it.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you guys for coming out, and it was great seeing everybody, and you have a great rest of your night.